This is a podfic of I Didn't Know This Would Be Our Goodbye, a Silmarillion fic by Solitary Bird, read for you by Solitary Bird. This fic is rated T for Fall of Gondolin related trauma. The many lives and backgrounds of Erestor continue. This Erestor woke up on the shores of Ecthelion. Not that anyone remembers that, and they treat him like he was born at the rising of the sun, much to his annoyance. Glorfindel asked Erestor to look over the plans he had drawn up for a new dance hall to be added to the House of the Golden Flower. Erestor agrees, thinking that he may be able to convince him to let the House of the Mole be in charge of the construction. Unfortunately, Glorfindel is late, brings Ecthelion with him, and has the audacity to have architectural plans for a building that will 100% fall down and kill people. They meet at the Blue Rose Cafe. It's neutral ground between the House of the Mole and the House of the Golden Flower. Erestor doesn't even know why he's the one that's been forced to come here. Actually, he does. He just doesn't want to add more fuel to the rumours. But here he is, despite his misgivings. At least Glorfindel hadn't specifically asked for Erestor by name to be the representative to give him a quote on some big new construction project the House of the Golden Flower is planning. Being asked for by name would be scandalous. This was just business, and business was good. The House of the Mole might be poorer than the other more established houses, but they had pride in their craft. Everyone had need of the miners, architects, and those who specialised in the building trades they were comprised of. The House of the Golden Flower wanted to build an extension to their current hall, the one they used to hold dances, and the House of the Mole were the only ones capable of an undertaking of this size. They also charged a hefty price. Securing a job commission like this would boost Erestor's standing in a city full of people that seemed to care for little other than reputation and who still saw him as an outsider. There was little else that he could do than play along. The politics and gossip of this new city was starting to grate on Erestor's nerves. Glorfindel was late, and it made Erestor bristle with resentment. They had set this time after much negotiation, and he couldn't even respect Erestor enough to turn up when he had agreed to meet here more than a month ago. Erestor stood up and went to order himself another drink. He'd already had 2 teas whilst waiting, and as much as he really wanted to start throwing back wine, that wasn't a good look quite so early in the day. Having rumours flying around that he was also an alcoholic to add to everything else wasn't something that he particularly wanted to deal with. Erestor settled for some pressed fruit juice and a slice of carrot cake because he was feeling especially miserable today, and Maeglin would be picking up the tab. He was beginning to debate whether to just leave and take the derision of being stood up for a business meeting when Glorfindel finally arrived. Not alone, as had been promised, but with Ecthelion on his arm. It had to be Ecthelion, only he would wear so much jewellery to such an informal meeting as this. Erestor hoped in vain that they would miss him in the crowded cafe for a few pleasant seconds, but it was not to be. He locked eyes with Glorfindel, and he almost bounced over to Erestor's sitting spot next to a rambunctiously growing ficus. Ecthelion was dragged somewhat unenthusiastically behind him. His level of adornment would have been laughed at even by Finwë at the height of Noldoric's Sessentirion, Erestor thought. It was an unkind thought, but Ecthelion was also one of the few who had passed through the grinding ice without losing the childlike whimsy that they had all once had in a man. His brightness, his sweetness, and light grated on Erestor, who still had nightmares of Aqualunde and the blood that stained the waves. That light he was sorely jealous of, his light had long gone out. Instead, the architect, builder, and structural engineer emitted an off-putting gloom. Both Ecthelion and Glorfindel shined too brightly for him. They midday sun in summer compared to his endless winter night. Yet he could not escape them, drawn as he was to the pair, as a moth is to a flame. He still had burns on his hands from trying to save Amrod from the flames which had engulfed the ship he was trapped in, and a literal dent in his skull from the dagger Aglarip. Friendship was what had spurred him to follow in both cases, and yet Eri was alone. His heart longed for something now he could never have. They were bound to one another, and any interest on Erestor's part was taboo. Another sin to add to his roster, another stain on his bad reputation. They'd brought building plans this time. Erestor would rather have one of the moles draw up the drafts. Some of the houses had very interesting ideas as to what a structurally sound building should look like. He unrolled it on the table as Ecthelion left the table to get himself a drink, before the true diplomacy started. The parchment flattened beneath the napkin holder and a bottle of vinegar to prevent it from rolling up once more displays a decently drawn architectural plan. Glorfindel stared at him over his perusal of the load-bearing beams. Erestor pointedly ignored him. You need 4 more pillars if you plan for them to be the sole load-bearing structure for your building, or the roof will cave in on the dancers. This much was obvious after little more than the most cursory looks over the plan. Laid out before him was disaster waiting to happen. Roofs don't just simply float. I bow to your superior knowledge, Glorfindel laughed. You should, Erestor thought. I built Tyrion, and the city you're sitting in, though everyone seems to have conveniently forgotten about that. He drew on the extra pillars, shifting the placement of the others to better fit them in aesthetically. Erestor drew a large circle around the supporting beam that ran along the roof's ridge, an action that drew him confused looks from both his clients as Ecthelion finally returned with their drinks. You absolutely cannot use pine of this thickness on a span this wide and expect it to hold up overlapping marble tiles without sufficient cross-bracing. You'd have them use straw like the humans do? Ecthelion asked, a smirk on his face. They could be generously read as playful instead of condescending, but Erestor is too annoyed to bestow such a grace upon him as he elbowed Glorfindel in the ribs. No, I'd have the House of the Golden Flower use a thicker beam that isn't pine, and instead a hardwood and enough rafters to actually make it structurally sound, so, as I said about the other matter, the roof doesn't fall in and kill everyone. His response is considerably more annoyed in its tone than Erestor intended, much less professional than he likes to hold himself, but around these two elves Erestor can never quite hold that mask fully in front of his face. You need more struts too. The changes to the building's design are not without expense. The hardwood beam alone is more than 3 times the price as the pine one would have been, but Erestor was able to cut them a very good deal on the mosaic flooring. It's the same pattern as the feast hall flooring they installed 200 years ago, and the dimensions are almost an exact copy and paste. For something like that, half the cost was in the design work in the first place. Erestor would have to make sure that they still had a supply of the speciality golden tiles, though, because those needed 3 firings and took forever to complete. If there weren't enough readily available, it might add 3 extra weeks to the expected completion date, but there would definitely be plenty of the white, black and yellow tiles in the storage yard. All were popular colours. A new contract was drawn up there in that cafe, surrounded by families and dating couples. Do we really need that many supporting trusses? Glorfindel asked, no doubt upset that the structural reality of his new dance hall meant that in order to defy gravity, his clean aesthetic roof would need things installed in it to actually hold the thing up. Yes. Practicality had won out in the end. There had been a weird tension between them afterwards, none of them knowing whether to leave yet. Glorfindel kept looking like he was about to ask Erestor something, but the words never exited his mouth, much to the growing annoyance of Ecthelion and Erestor's own discomfort. To escape this weird tension, Erestor lied about needing to meet with another client and all but ran out of the cafe. He would never know what it was the 2 lords wished to say to him, for this meeting would be their last in the hidden city of Turgon. His heart wanted him to believe that it was a love confession, but that could not be so. That could only be wishful thinking. When they were all betrayed and the city brought under siege, for a time the soldiers of the Fountain and the Golden Flower sought refuge in that building made by Erestor. At the coming of the dragons, and when one found its way onto the roof, they praised him, for it did not crush them beneath its weight, but held strong. Erestor built things to last, and long did the dance hall of the Golden Flower stand, sheltering those that could find their way beneath its roof, until it too was at last consumed by fire. The end. Thank you for listening.